taught at just 10 years old that money is not something you spend your entire life chasing. Imagine learning early that wealth is built through knowledge, patience, and ownership, not just hard work alone. While most people grow up believing they must trade all of their time for money, a different mindset exists behind closed doors. A mindset that teaches freedom comes from building systems, assets, and opportunities that continue to grow even when you are not working. Most children are taught how to survive in the world. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, work hard for decades, repeat the cycle. But wealthy children are often taught something completely different. They learn how businesses work. They learn about investing, ownership, cash flow, and leverage. They are taught that every dollar can become an employee, working quietly in the background to create even more money over time. Instead of only learning how to earn income, they learn how to build assets that produce income for them. And that single lesson changes everything. There's a hidden difference between how wealthy families raise their children and how the average family does. It's not always visible from the outside. Both may live in similar neighborhoods, attend the same schools, and wear the same clothes. But behind closed doors, the conversations are completely different. One child is taught how to survive the world, while the other is taught how to build ownership inside it. And the difference is not intelligence. It's not luck. It's not even hard work alone. Because millions of hardworking people still struggle financially every single year, the real difference begins with mindset, habits, financial awareness, and the way children are taught to think about money from an early age. Most children grow up hearing things like, work hard, play it safe, or get a secure job. But wealthy families often teach something entirely different. They teach their children how money moves, how businesses operate, how assets grow, and why ownership matters more than simply earning a paycheck. Instead of teaching fear around money, they teach strategy, patience, and long-term thinking. While some children are taught to trade time for money, wealthy children are often taught to make money work for them. They learn the importance of investing, building systems, creating value, and owning things that continue to produce income over time. And over the years, those lessons slowly shape confidence, opportunities, and financial freedom long before adulthood even begins. Today, I'm going to show you the exact lessons rich families quietly pass down from generation to generation. The habits, beliefs, and principles that create wealth behind the scenes, long before success becomes visible to the world. Because once you understand these lessons, you begin to see that wealth is not built by accident. It is built by what people are taught, repeated, and conditioned to believe every single day. Most children grow up hearing the same life formula from the time they're young. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, work hard for the next 40 years. And while there is nothing wrong with hard work, most people are never taught how money truly works beyond earning a paycheck. They are trained to survive financially, but rarely taught how to create financial freedom. Wealthy families often teach something completely different. Instead of preparing their children only to work inside systems, they teach them how to build systems of their own. They teach them to think beyond hourly income and monthly salaries. From an early age, their children begin learning about ownership, leverage, investing, and creating things that continue producing value long after the work is finished. Instead of asking, what job do you want when you grow up? They ask questions like, what can you build? What can you own? What problem can you solve? Because they understand that ownership changes everything. A person who owns assets begins to earn differently, think differently, and live differently over time. That ownership can take many forms. A business that generates income, stocks that grow in value, real estate that produces cash flow, digital products that sell around the clock, brands that continue making money long after they are created. While most people are taught to trade time for income, wealthy families teach their children to create assets that continue working even when they are not. Because rich people understand something most people never fully learn until much later in life. Working for money will always have limits. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy a person can give. But ownership has no limit. Assets can grow while you sleep. Businesses can scale beyond your time. Investments can multiply over years and decades. And once a child understands that lesson early enough, their entire future begins to change. Most kids are taught how to spend money, but wealthy children are taught how to multiply it. They learn early that money is more than something you spend, it's something you can grow. While most people are taught to work for money, wealthy families often teach their children how to make money work for them. They learn the difference between assets and liabilities at a young age. A liability takes money out of your pocket. An asset puts money into your pocket. And once a child understands that simple idea, the way they look at money changes forever. Instead of buying things just to impress people, they begin asking smarter questions. Will this make me richer or poorer? Will this grow in value? Will this help me financially in the future? That mindset shift changes everything. Because over time, wealthy people focus less on looking rich and more on building freedom, ownership, and long-term wealth. Average families often fear failure, but wealthy families see failure differently. They see it as training. Instead of protecting their children from every mistake, they allow them to experience small failures early in life because they understand that real growth doesn't come from avoiding mistakes, but from learning through them. That's why many wealthy parents encourage their children to try simple business ideas at a young age. Selling candy, washing cars, starting small online businesses, creating YouTube channels, running small online stores, not because they need the money, but because they value the experience more than the outcome. Through these experiences, children begin to develop real-world skills that school doesn't always teach: confidence, communication, leadership, and problem-solving. And over time, while others are afraid of making mistakes, they become comfortable taking risks, learning that failure is not the end, but part of the process. That mindset builds resilience, and that resilience often becomes the foundation of long-term success and wealth later in life. Most people chase attention, but wealthy people understand something deeper. They chase relationships. Because attention is temporary, but relationships can create opportunities for a lifetime. Rich parents often teach their children that success is not only about what you know, but also about who you connect with. They explain that one strong connection can completely change the direction of a person's life. That's why they emphasize communication early: how to speak clearly, how to listen carefully, how to understand people instead of just talking to them. They also teach the importance of trust. Because without trust, even the best opportunities fall apart. So children learn that being reliable, honest, and respectful is more valuable than trying to impress everyone. They are also taught to focus on value. Instead of asking, "What can I get from this person?" they are encouraged to ask, "What can I contribute to this person's life?" Because wealthy families understand a simple truth: money doesn't move randomly. It flows through people, relationships, and networks. And the more value you bring into people's lives, the more doors begin to open for you naturally. Over time, this mindset shapes how they approach every interaction. They stop seeing people as competition and start seeing them as potential connections. And that shift often becomes one of the biggest advantages in building long-term success. This might shock you. Many wealthy families actually teach their children to avoid looking rich. They don't focus on flashy lifestyles or trying to impress people with expensive things. Instead, they teach something called quiet wealth. Because they understand a simple truth most people never learn early: appearances can be misleading. Someone can look successful on the outside while struggling financially on the inside. Cars, clothes, jewelry, and social media posts can create an image of wealth. But that image doesn't always reflect reality. In fact, many wealthy families believe that constantly showing money is often a sign of insecurity or poor financial habits. So instead of teaching their children to show off wealth, they teach them to build it quietly, to focus more on what is growing in the background than what is being seen in public. Because real wealth is not about attention, it's about control. Control over time, control over decisions, control over lifestyle, control over your future. That's why wealthy families often protect freedom more than they protect appearances. They understand that money is only useful when it creates options. Options to travel when you want. Options to rest when you need. Options to support your family. Options to walk away from situations you don't want. And that kind of freedom cannot be faked. It must be built over time. So they teach their children to value freedom over validation, to avoid chasing approval from people who don't understand financial reality. And instead of asking, "How do I look to others?" they ask, "How secure am I really?" Because security matters more than status, and stability matters more than attention. They also teach that protecting wealth is just as important as building it. Because many people don't lose money by not earning enough. They lose it by trying to impress others. So wealthy families encourage discipline, simple living, smart spending, long-term thinking, and they teach that wealth should not create stress. It should reduce it. That's why they often live below their means, even when they can afford more. Because they understand something powerful. The goal is not to look rich for a moment. The goal is to stay rich for a lifetime. And that requires patience. It requires planning. It requires restraint. Over time, this mindset shapes how they see life completely differently. They stop measuring success by what people see, and start measuring success by what they control, and what they can keep growing quietly in the background. Because real wealth is often invisible at first. It's not loud. It's not always posted online. It's not always talked about. But it is stable, it is growing, and it is protected. And that is the difference they teach early, between looking rich for approval and being wealthy for freedom. Because in the end, wealthy families understand something very important. Attention fades quickly, but freedom lasts. The biggest lesson rich families teach their children is this: money is a tool, not identity, not self-worth. not happiness, just a tool. And when a child truly understands that at a deep level, it changes the way they see everything around them. Because most people grow up attaching emotions to money, they feel successful when they earn more and stressed when they earn less. But wealthy families try to disconnect money from emotion. They teach that money is not a measure of your value as a person. It does not define your intelligence, your worth, or your happiness. It simply responds to how you use it and how you manage it. So instead of fearing money or worshipping it, they teach their children to respect it and control it, like a tool that can build things or destroy things depending on how it is handled. When you see money this way, your mindset shifts. You stop using money to prove something to others. You stop chasing status or validation through spending. You stop making emotional decisions with your finances. And you start becoming intentional. Intentional with saving, intentional with spending, intentional with investing. You begin thinking ahead instead of reacting in the moment. You start asking better questions. Not just, can I afford this? But, what will this cost me in the future? Or, what could this money become if I used it differently? That is where discipline begins. And discipline is one of the biggest differences between financial stress and financial freedom. Because when money is treated as emotion, it disappears quickly. But when money is treated as a tool, it starts to build things over time. Wealthy families understand this deeply, so they teach their children early that money is not something to be chased emotionally. It is something to be managed strategically. And when this mindset becomes part of how someone thinks every day, they stop living in survival mode. They stop reacting only to immediate needs, and they begin building a future on purpose. A future where decisions are not based on fear, but based on strategy. They begin to realize that every dollar has potential. It can be spent, it can be saved, it can be invested, it can be used to create more value. And the choice they make determines their direction in life. So instead of only thinking short term, they begin thinking long term. They understand that small decisions today can create massive outcomes tomorrow. And that wealth is not built in one moment. It is built in habits, daily choices, weekly discipline, yearly consistency. That is why wealthy families focus so much on mindset first. Because once the mindset is correct, the money follows the behavior, and the behavior follows the thinking. And over time, that creates a completely different life path. One where money is no longer controlling emotions, but is being controlled with purpose. And that is the real lesson. Money is not who you are. It is what you use. And when you finally understand that, you stop living emotionally with money and start building intelligently with it. The truth is, most people were never taught wealth correctly. Not because they couldn't learn, but because the knowledge was never passed down. But now you know, and once your mindset changes, your future can change too. Because wealth doesn't start in your bank account. It starts in your thinking. If you want to learn how the wealthy think, build, and create freedom, subscribe now, because the next lesson could completely change your financial future.